The band returned to the studio shortly afterwards to record the follow-up to Pretty's For You, Easy Action. Looking for someone to capture their sound in a more professional manner than Zappa had, they ended up working with Neil Young's producer, David Briggs. Yet despite the cleaner recording and the media hype surrounding them, when the LP was released in March 1970, it fared worse than their debut, and the band was still unhappy with the finished product.
He still wasn't the producer that the band Alice Cooper was looking for. It was a little bit cleaner production on the album, but it wasn't the sound that would eventually be Alice Cooper. You could tell right away. And when we did Lay Down and Die Goodbye, which had a lot of free-form, free-flowing music, kind of psychedelic, and he just called it, okay, well, we'll put the psychedelic shit on now. I think he had a gig. He had to be there. He did his work. It was his business. He recorded the album the best he could, but we could tell pretty much from the beginning, because that was the reason we wanted somebody like David Briggs. We wanted a more studio-sounding album. Well, we got it, but it lost the energy of Pretty's For You to a certain extent.
Coming after you.
Working with David Briggs and the Neil Young side of things, it ironed out all the interesting elements of the early Alice Cooper band. I mean, the fact that Zappa kind of lost interest, he had his own projects to pursue, they were left then without a lifeline, without any sympathetic characters to assist them, to enable them. Completely out of place in the city of the birds, the mamas and the papas, and this is just, even though they embodied in some way this whole Hollywood Babylon element. I mean, Alice took his whole act from Betty Davis in Whatever Happened to Baby Jane, this plastered in makeup, this old, wretched kind of woman, and he even moved like that, incredible. So in some respects they really were the authentic side of Hollywood, but it was not the side that rock culture valued at that time.
Unfortunately, Pretty's For You sold maybe 13,000 copies, broke into Billboard Top 200 at 99. Easy Action was released and sold a little more than half of that, maybe like 9,000 copies, and didn't even break into the top Billboard 200. So at that point, he became really it was just the business of the record company. It wasn't anymore getting together with us and talking about the creative aspect of the band direction musically or artistically.
While the Alice Cooper group was struggling, the Magic Band had seen some major upheavals since finishing Trout Mask Replica. With the months of hard living seemingly at an end, guitarist Jeff Cotton quit the group, while drummer John French had been violently forced out of the band. Having met his future wife, Jan, Van Vliet had also insisted that remaining members Bill Harkleroad and Mark Boston find a new residence, and the Woodland Hills days were over. Yet it was Harkleroad who now took French's role as the musical director of the band, and armed with a portable tape recorder to capture Beefheart's flashes of inspiration, a new period of unorthodox composition began.
I don't know how it was for John. I don't remember that if he stayed up the late hours and was on phone duty, because we were in the same house. I wasn't in the same house. Bill, come over and get this idea at 3 in the morning. So it was gruesome, and it stayed that way for a while. The portability of it, because I'm coming over, record, and the tapes were cheap, economic, and you're just buying all these 99 cents. I have no idea what they cost, but the tape, so I'm filling up, and I got a bag of 30 tapes. Well, what is that, 30 hours of stuff? Wow.
Yet the use of the cassette recorder and Harkleroad's distance from Beefheart while piecing the ideas together meant that the material for the new album, Lick My Decals Off Baby, was notably different from the Trout Mask compositions. No longer living under one roof, Harkleroad was also able to refine or restructure ideas to give the music more coherence.
As far as Lick My Decals Off, the start of that, and the cassettes and the cassettes and the cassettes, I remember asking him, okay, what is this? Wait. Okay, and then getting him back, and there was some, he would even speak, so I'd hear him talking on the cassettes and things like that, and especially with certain tunes, I would go, that's going there, and this is going there, that's ridiculous, and I know he doesn't know. So yeah, I moved things around quite a bit.
With Harkleroad and bassist Mark Boston busy putting the pieces together and practicing their parts, Beefheart brought ex-Mothers of Invention drummer Art Tripp into the band. Yet despite Tripp's years of classical training as a percussionist, after months of rehearsals, Beefheart decided that there was only one drummer who could handle the unique rhythms of the material, and John French was reinstated, with Tripp transferred to the marimba. Despite his reservations, French felt that the situation had improved sufficiently for him to return to his old band.
This was a year and a half after I'd left the group, and Bill and Mark had been working on a single album for a year and a half. Mostly those two guys had been working together for a year and a half. And by this time, Don had gotten his picture on the cover of the Rolling Stone. Warner Brothers was interested. They were putting money into the group. So there was actually some money in the bank. So they were they were giving us a weekly check and things like this. So it was a lot better situation for a time.
Yet across the 18 months that it took to compose, rehearse and record the follow-up to Trout Mask Replica, one figure was notably absent from the proceedings.
I didn't see Frank at all during decals. I think we were still connecting, going to his place, things like that, but there was a separation happening. I could feel it. I was trying to separate from Don that, so I wasn't around for as much of that, so I don't know what was really going on there. I really don't, but I didn't see Frank except at Frank's house at all during that time.
A new feud had developed. At the end of 1969, a compilation album, Zapped, had been put together by Warner's as a budget sampler for the Straight and Bizarre labels, comprising material from nearly all of the acts, including Zappa himself. Yet rather than see the potential for reaching new audiences, Beefheart instead took offense at having his compositions released alongside those of Wildman Fisher and the GTOs.
In a way, I think Beefheart was upset. He felt like he was being lumped in with the Alice Cooper group and Wildman Fisher and the GTOs and being promoted with the freaks, or like a freak.
I think that Beefheart's objections to being put on a compilation record with Wildman Fisher and the GTOs or whoever else was there was entirely spurious. I mean, this is purely record business. It was a cheap sampler that went out, and it's just as likely to have resulted in more sales of his record as in GTO records. So I think it was just an ego problem there, and which then became amplified, and he thought that Zappa was using him as just as another freak on the label rather than a genuine musical composer. Plus, I don't think Beefheart ever got on with Herb Cohen that well, and he thought that Cohen was leading Zappa in the wrong direction. In fact, he told me about that. I mean, he really did think that that Frank was being sort of conned, and it was all sort of Herb Cohen's fault that Beefheart was being turned into a commodity, should we say. So it was paranoia against Herb, who after all had negotiated his contract with Bizarre and Straight, and also somehow extricated him from his previous arrangements. It's the usual thing, I think. If you help somebody, then they often resent it. And they began life as equals back at high school, and now suddenly here's Zappa, who's he's a label boss, and he's got all these other records out, and he's got a band, and he's clearly the much more successful of the two. And so he didn't like to feel in any way sort of in Zappa's debt, I think.
Despite the ongoing feud, it didn't affect the music, and in December 1970, Lick My Decals Off Baby was released. Again championed more in Europe than in the US. Over time, it would be perhaps unfairly seen as a companion piece to Trout Mask Replica, although it was a distinctive and remarkable work in its own right.
Trout Mask and Decals are definitely a pair. There is a different listening experience, and I think it's more about texture than anything else. Lick My Decals Off, I think, is more of a connoisseur's favourite now, because Trout Mask, in a way, it's been overdone. It is the masterpiece. But Lick My Decals Off, there's some amazing... It's much more sophisticated in a way, I think, the production, and it's got different timbres in there. It's got the marimba. There's more space. There's not quite as cluttered as Trout Mask. So I think maybe Bill Harkleroad was not necessarily being true quite to the chaos of Beefheart's own vision. I think he was cleaning it up a little bit. It does sound clearer, apart from Flash Gordon's Ape. I think that last track was just cacophony. The band were almost mixed out of that one. So yeah, I think there is a clarity of what's going on there, and I think Ed Marimba is important with the marimbas as well. It gives a bit more light.
Singing the Smithsonian Institute blues, singing the Smithsonian Institute blues. The way it's going, the Bria top hits, I know you just can't lose.
I think Lick My Decals Off is a totally independent record, and I think it's a humbler record. It's a more intimate record. It's not a huge, jagged masterpiece on a hill. There's something quite quiet about it, in a way. I mean, there's an awful lot of marimba on it. Artie Tripp had joined the Magic Band. Beefheart was keen to use his percussion skills, renames him Ed Marimba. So it has this warm wooden percussion throughout it. And doing like little songs like A Woe Is a Me Bop and so on, and often with quite short lyrics, which are quite comprehensible, the whole thing feels like he's done Troutmaster Replica, this huge thing, and it's kind of withdrawing breath and being charming, and I think that's what it is. That's how I hear it.
No matter how calm and charming the album may have seemed in comparison to Troutmask, on Lick My Decals Off Baby, Beefheart was still forging a very singular musical language, one that was jagged, complex and unpredictable.
You know, you listen to a piece like Petrified Forest and it's incredible. I think that it's 2.5 minutes long. I think it goes through about 20 different shifts. That is an extraordinary piece. It's one of these short tracks just tucked away on side 2, but so much is going on.
Human bark and beautiless hide for beauty. Bow your eyes and heads to the duty of the dead. Suck the ground. Breathe life into the dead dinosaurs. Let the past demons rip their heads and belch fire into the air of now.
It's just like an 1.5-hour film distilled into 2.5 minutes with plot and character. It's got everything in there, so much. More than most bands have in their whole career, to be honest.